Welcome to Frameworks. This is a place for coaches who want more than just reps and sets. We dig into the principles, philosophy, and stories that help you coach with clarity, design with purpose, and keep chasing mastery. Today, we're tackling the foundations of health, wellness, and vitality, and that is habits. So habits-based coaching is how we guide clients from needing us to eventually leading themselves. In this episode, I'm going to lay out a 6-step pathway. So we're going to talk about number 1, intention, number 2, assessment, number 3, prescription, number 4, strategy, number 5, time, and then finally number 6, success markers. So grab your notebooks. We're going to move people from reliance to self-regulation in this episode. So let's get into it. All right, so let's get into this. First, I think that it's really important to understand that coaching isn't about just prescribing macros or chasing wearable scores. It's about architecting habits so solid that our clients eventually forget that they're tracking at all. Our job is to build autonomy, not analytics. But don't get me wrong, there definitely is a time and a place to hyper-focus or fixate on data. Data is good. I'm not saying that data and technology are bad. Where it becomes bad is when it's the means to an end. All we're focusing on is that number. And our worth and success and failure is all about, did this Apple Watch tell me that I failed, or did it tell me that I succeeded? Okay, so what we're going to talk about today is this concept of, number 1, how we can leverage data and technology and wearables and Apple Watches and Oura Rings and Whoops and so on and so forth. How can we leverage that data very specifically to get someone to a state of autonomy? Or better said, how we can build really solid habits leveraging technology. So as I filmed this, it was actually this week that we had a webinar, and we do monthly what we call community calls. So if you guys are an OPEX coach or you're a user in our platform, CoachRx, you guys just have access to these webinars on a monthly basis. So if you're not a part of the OPEX sphere, definitely jump on board. But anyways, we have these webinars every single month. And this month's webinar was all about what we're talking about today. So I dig in a little bit deeper and give a bunch of sample prescriptions and all of that as it comes to this 6-step process. So if you weren't on that webinar, definitely check it out. We'll go ahead and link that in the description below. All right, so now I'm going to lay out this 6-step process, and this will be the framework portion of this episode. Okay, so number 1, the first thing that we have to focus on is intention. What is our intention? Okay, so if we're prescribing a lifestyle prescription or a macro prescription or whatever the case is, we should always start with an intention. I know that this seems obvious, but sometimes we just throw out prescriptions with a goal in mind. The intention of that prescription isn't agreed on or upon with you and your client. So number 1, have a really, really clear intention. Clarify the why behind any habit or data point. So something to ask yourself, what problem am I solving? How will this enhance their life? Okay, so a pro tip here, if the intention can't be stated in one sentence, start over, refine, simplify, and clarify. But pillar number 1 or framework number 1 is always start with an intention. And this intention needs to be agreed upon with you and your client. An example that I'll give is if the intention is to get your client to move more, maybe that is your intention. Maybe it's as clear as that. Or maybe it's even more specific than that. I want to, take X amount of steps every single day. Or if it's a sleep prescription, I want to move from 7 hours of sleep to 8 hours of sleep, right? Like that's just a really, really clear intention. It should be really simple, but that's why you're doing what you're doing. Framework number 2, we should then move on to an assessment. Okay, so anyone that's been doing this for any amount of time, from a coach's standpoint, you probably love assessments. What do assessments do for us? They establish baselines. They give us context. They might even lay out or make priorities really clear. Okay. So as coaches, we're always looking for a nudge where it's saying like, oh, focus on this or focus on that. And I think that's why we just love assessing clients. And it should be no different in lifestyle. Okay. So in assessment, we have to establish a baseline. So progress is not a guessing game. Okay. So a question to ask yourself around this is, where are we now? what does their wearable already show? If you're tracking sleep, what is the quality of sleep objectively over 7 days? If you're tracking movement outside of the gym, maybe you're looking at something like steps. Okay, how many steps do they average on a day-by-day basis? So pro tip here, we want to collect 7 days of normal data before prescribing change. And something that's really important here is that we have to ensure that our clients understand that they're not trying to impress you, okay? This is to establish a baseline. So be very explicit with your clients. It's almost like before you start a macro prescription with someone, you want to get a baseline and understand what they have been eating. So when we have clients track, let's say 3 days of food, we have to be really explicit. When you track this 3 days of food or 5 days of food, whatever you're giving them, I need you to continue to eat how you normally eat. Because if you clean it up and you decrease calories or whatever the case is, I don't have a clear understanding of where we're coming from. And if we don't have a clear understanding of where our clients are coming from, we will probably not be able to get them where they want to go. So framework number 2 is assessment. Okay, now framework number 3 is where I think too many coaches start with, and we start with the prescription. Okay, we shouldn't start with the prescription. We should understand our intentions. We should have an assessment and understand where our clients are now, and then we go into the prescription. Okay, so here we're defining the exact habit or metric to act on. A question to ask yourself: what single behavior moves the needle most as it relates to the intention? Okay, so if the intention is, I think I'll go with the sleep one again. If the intention is to increase sleep from 7 to 8 hours, let's say, the prescription isn't going to be, I just need you to sleep 8 hours. The prescription might be something much more specific than that. It might be sleep hygiene, right? So it might be sleep hygiene, and then we're reverse engineering from a bedtime and a wake time. Okay, so, I want you to set an alarm to go to bed at 10 p.m. Okay. At 9 p.m., I want you to turn off all electronics. I want you to take a hot shower. I want you to read for 15 to 20 minutes, so on and so forth, leading up to that 10 p.m. bedtime. And then I need an alarm set for 6 p.m. And I want to get all 8 of those hours of sleep. So if you wake up at 4:45, just try to go back to sleep, because I want you to fulfill that entire 8 hours of sleep. Okay, so that's just one example, but the prescription should be much more specific than the intention. Okay, and then pro tip here, keep it binary, right? Done, not done, success or fail. Okay, make it really, really clear. If the intention is 8 hours of sleep and you got 7:15, it's like not done. Okay, keep moving, keep working. Okay, so in CoachRx, we try to make this really easy for coaches in terms of prescribing lifestyle. We just give clients compliance scores just like they would get in their exercise routine. Okay, we should track compliance and lifestyle just like we track compliance and exercise. Okay, so that is framework number 3, and that is all around prescription. Okay, so now we've agreed on the prescription. You've given your client that prescription, but we are only halfway there at this point. Okay, the next thing is a strategy. Okay, so I think many coaches bypass this. And I think that is a huge mistake, because if we don't give our clients a strategy, we are quite literally setting them up for failure. So sometimes the strategy can kind of be in the prescription, right? Like going back to the example around increasing sleep by 1 hour, the strategy is in that prescription because we're giving them sleep hygiene tips. Okay, but we might need to go a little bit further than that. Okay, we have to map the play-by-play for execution. Okay, so a question to ask yourselves: when, where, and with whom will this happen? So an example here for our sleep example. So we have the prescription, and we talked about that sleep hygiene practice starting at 9 p.m. Okay, now let's get more specific. Okay, how do we set ourselves up to be successful at 9 p.m.? Maybe we start talking about like work. If your client is a night owl and they're like, the nighttime is when I get so much work done, and I just love to work until I get tired, right? So now you have to have a strategy around, hey, maybe we have a work cutoff, and maybe that work cutoff is not right at 9, because then we might be tempted to push it 15 or 20 minutes. Maybe that work cutoff is 7 or 8 p.m. for that person. Okay, so you can kind of go down rabbit holes, but you have to just understand exactly where your client is today. And that's why consultation is so important. So important. We need to consult with our clients. We need to understand exactly where they are. We need to understand what's worked for them in the past, what hasn't worked for them in the past, to then be able to give them a strategy, because we have to know the person to understand what we might need to strategize against. Okay, so that is framework number 4. We should always give our clients a strategy after the prescription to increase the likelihood of success in that prescription. All right, framework number 5. Okay, this is obvious. It should be obvious, because when we know, or when we talk about principles around goal setting, like, goals should be time bound, and so should these habit or lifestyle prescriptions. Okay, give the habit a season, not a life sentence. Okay, so a really simple example here is drinking water. Okay, so if you're asking your client to drink half their body weight in ounces per day of water, you're not going to say, hey, I need you to track how much water you're drinking for the rest of your life, right? Remember, the goal here is to build a habit. So maybe it's 4 weeks where we're like, okay, we're going to explicitly track this for 4 weeks. And I want you to just be really specific on every ounce of water that you put in your body. And we want to nail, 80 ounces every single day for the next 4 weeks. Okay. And then you get to the end of that 4 weeks, and we'll talk about this in the next framework, but you get to the end of that 4 weeks and then you just make a decision, right? Do we have to continue to track this, or is this now built as a habit? A question to ask yourself is, how long before we reassess? 4 to 6 weeks is, quite frankly, long enough for a lot of people and a lot of situations, but this is going to be so specific to the person, what the habit is, how far outside of their reach this habit is currently. But we need to make sure that there's time to build this as a habit. So when I say like 4 to 6 weeks, don't be so attached to that we're like, we need to be done at that time. For some people, it might be, 16, 18, 24 weeks. I don't know. But you just need to make sure that you're leading them to building that prescription as a habit, and you're not just making it a to-do. Okay, so we don't want to build, the opposite of autonomy, which would be reliance on having to just track this thing every single day. Goal is we track it so that we don't have to track it again. So to do that, we need to make sure that everything is nice and time bound. Okay, and then finally, we have success markers as framework number 6. Okay, so here we have to decide what good looks like, and then we graduate. Okay, we either graduate or we continue. Okay, a question to ask yourself here is, how will we know that this habit is locked in? Okay, so just, a general principle, right, is if they're hitting something at about 90%, that's pretty good, right? That's pretty good. Maybe, the conversation happens of the graduation conversation happens if you're hitting 90+% compliance in that thing. If you're at 70% compliance in something, I wouldn't stop focusing on it, because that is so clearly not built in as a habit. Okay, so, we talk about this all the time when it comes to fitness. We want to make fitness like brushing your teeth. Okay, it's just something that you do. And I know you guys have probably heard me say this if you've listened to this podcast or have been on any of our education. Do you have to think about brushing your teeth when you wake up in the morning? I hope the answer to that is no, right? So we want to make these habits, we want to make fitness, wellness, all of those things like brushing your teeth. So you have to have a success marker. Okay, so if the goal is, and this should be clear in a lot of these situations, if we're going through the 6 frameworks properly, if the intention is to go from 7 to 8 hours of sleep, what do you guys think the success marker is? 90% plus of the time we're sleeping 8 hours. Okay, so that success marker is going to be really clearly defined based on the intention. Okay, so this is essentially just a reassessment. Okay, so you're taking them through a reassessment, and it might not be something so specific because you just have the data in front of you. So you're kind of behind your computer and you're doing the reassessment to understand what their compliance has been over the last 4 weeks or however long the prescription has been going for. So when it comes to applying these frameworks with your clients, I think the most important thing is that you don't overwhelm. Okay, so we talk about this all the time. We talk about how to build a solid lifestyle program. And what I say is figure out what the lowest hanging fruit is. What is the one habit that'll have the most carryover to other habits? Okay, so find that one habit and hyper focus on that. Okay, don't find 3, 4, 6 things that someone might need to work on, because quite frankly, a lot of people that we work with, They have a lot of things that we could choose to work on, but find the lowest hanging fruit and only work on that one thing. If you are tracking data, use those wearables as training wheels, not prosthetics. Okay. So what I mean by that is you just want to use those for an amount of time so you can graduate from them and you don't have to hyperfixate on using those for the rest of your coach-client relationship. And it goes back to that idea of using technology so you don't have to use it or rely on it in the future, okay? And habit stack like programming, okay? So think about habits very similar to how we program exercise. Volume, so that would be frequency. Intensity, that would be difficulty. Recovery, that would be number of simultaneous habits. And I'm asking you just to choose one, okay? So habit stack and really look at it like you're looking at exercise, volume, intensity, and recovery, okay? For you guys that are in CoachRx, and if you're not in CoachRx, you're absolutely crazy that you're not, because we just added a ton of new features that allows you to track habits and coach your clients' lifestyle and understand, what their health, where their health data sits and trending over time and all of that. But your CoachRx workflow, build a lifestyle block, connect some wearables, make it low barrier so your clients don't have to go in their app and constantly update, okay? And then, look at compliance over time. If the goal is 8 hours of sleep and someone wears an Oura ring, that's awesome. Look at how many hours of sleep that they're getting. That data is going to be shuttled into CoachRx automatically. Look at that every week, right? Have a conversation with your client, whether that's digitally in CoachRx or in person. Have a conversation with your client and talk about where they are. If they're 100% compliance, awesome. Celebrate those victories. If they're at 40% compliance, talk about what needs to be done. How can you help? How can you assist them in going from 4 to 6 and eventually 8 hours of sleep? Okay. And again, celebrate those victories, right? If they say, hey, you saw some data that was missing for a day because I forgot to wear my Oura ring, but you know what? I still got 8 hours of sleep. It's like, awesome. That's great, right? Like that's a sign that they're moving a little bit closer to being autonomous, and whatever that habit that you're trying to build is. Those are the 6 frameworks, and appreciate you guys watching. Like I said at the top, if you haven't checked out our webinar, that was about an hour webinar. We have that in the description. And again, if you're not in CoachRx, get in CoachRx. We just put some really cool features in there, and we will see you guys next week.